So good morning. Today's daf is Kiddushin daf Yud We are on near the bottom of Yud Zayin Mabet. We're at the two dots that are 1, 2, 3, 4 lines into the wide lines. I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. So yesterday we learned a brisa that had three different teachings. Teaching number one is that if the master dies, a Jewish slave, meaning a male slave, serves the son, but not the daughter or any other heir. So there's an aspect where he continues to in servitude, assuming that we'll see that it means if the first 6 years have not yet been completed. If the master dies and the slave is female, so we're talking about a Jewish maidservant, she does not serve the son or the daughter, she or any other heir, she goes free. And then finally, if the master dies, and we're talking about a Jewish slave, so if he's not going, that Jewish male slave is not going to serve the son or the daughter of the master, meaning he's going to go free. If one of the following two conditions is true, if one, he's a slave whose ear was bored, so that means he finished his first 6 years and he decided that he wanted to stay on until Yovel, or two, he was sold to a non-Jew. So if in fact, and obviously we're not talking about where, Jews, in the Roman days were taken as slaves. That's not the kind of slave we're talking about. We're talking about somebody who obviously lives in Israel and is under Jewish Jewish rules and regulations, and while living there, is the one who ends up buying this person who is destitute and sells himself So that was the third of the rules. And so now we're going to address that third rule because we went through and explained the basis for each of the first two rules. And so now as we pick up at those two dots, we're going to quote the Brice's third teaching, and then explain the sources for its ruling. So let's get going. So hanirtza v'hanimkar la'ovid kochavim. If you have somebody whose ear was bored, the nirtza, or you have somebody who was sold to a non-Jew, eno ovid loas aben loas abasi. He's not going to serve anybody. There he goes free. So nirtza diksiv. Well, we know that that a nirtza does that, goes free, because take a look at the pasuk. V'ratza adonav es ozno, that the master will bore through his ear, b'martzeya, with a some kind of awl, some kind of pointy thing, v'avado le'olam, and he will serve him, avado le'olam. What does that imply? But not the daughter, son, or the daughter. And so as a result, that's how we know the first case, the nirtza case. How about nimkar la'obed kochava minayin? How do I know the second case? So Amar Chizkiya, Amar Kra, v'chishav es konehu, that when v'chishav es konehu, that he's going to calculate with the purchaser. This is in connection with negotiating the redemption price for the to buy back the slave from the Jewish slave from the non-Jewish owner, and below im yorshe konehu, and the implication is that it's only with the person who bought him that he's going to have to negotiate, implying that if that person were to die, he would go free and not get subjected to the ownership by that non-Jew's heirs. Okay, so now we've got the two teachings. So now that we've got that, so the Gemara is going to now detail several teachings of Rava, really three teachings of Rava, the first of which relates directly to Chizkiya's statement, and so it fits right in right here. So Amar Rava, Dvar Torah over Kochavim Yorish Es Aviv, and we're going to end up talking about inheritance. So according to the Torah, a non-Jew does inherit his father. Shnei Amar, v'chishev im konehu, that you have to figure out the amount that is owed only with the person who purchases a Jewish slave, v'lo im yorshe konehu, and not with the heirs of the purchaser. So miklal, but the general rule that would be implied, the islay yorshim, that in other situations he would have heirs, because if in fact a non-Jew never has heirs, well then you would never have to worry about the slave being inherited by one of these heirs. Instead, he would always go free. So the fact that we have to say in this context that he does not go down to the heirs, so then that implies that in general there would be heirs. Okay, so that's point number one of Rava. Point number two, ger et ha'oved kochavim, eno midivrei Torah ela midivrei sofer. When it comes to a convert's ability to inherit from a non-Jew, so now we're talking about where the child of a non-Jew converts, and then that non-Jew, not the parent of the convert, then dies. So that inheritance is not from the Torah, but rather the rabbis say that there should be such an inheritance. And how do we know that? So that's based on the following. We have a the Tanan. Now we actually here it should actually say, according to the little lamed in the Gemara, it should say Titania, because this is actually a brisa, not a. I'm sorry. Hold on a second. No, I apologize. This one is a Mishnah. So Tanan, it was taught in a Mishnah, and this Mishnah is in Demai. So what does it say? Ger va'ovid kochavim sheyorshu es aviem ovid kochavim sheyorshu es aviem ovid kochavim. So if you have two siblings, one is has converted to Judaism, and the other is still not Jewish, and they inherit their father who is not Jewish. So ger yachol lomar la'ovid kochavim. The convert is able to say to his brother, the non-Jew, Tol ata ovados o kochavim va'ani ma'os. You take the idols, I'll take the money. Tol ata yein nesech va'ani peirot. You take the wine that is set aside for service to the idols, and I'll take the fruit. Because why will he want to do that? Because if in fact he were to take either the idols or the wine, you would not be allowed to benefit from it. So there is an actual prohibition of benefiting from these items because they relate to idol worship. And so as a result, if the convert heir gets to the situation early enough, so he is not taken possession, so then he has this ability. However, mishibo lirshus ger asur. But once these items come into his possession, well, then it is prohibited to do so. The now, if you were to tell me that inheritance by a convert of his parents is biblical, well then kilo bowler shusonami. Even if the items that he's supposed to inherit haven't actually gone into his possession, he already owns half of them, if assuming that we're talking about a situation where they would split it equally. So as a result, and kishakel chilufech avodas kochavim hu dekashakel. And if he takes something that replaces it, he's taking a replacement. And the rule is, if we have here an idol, and I say, and this idol has been somehow I've taken ownership of this idol, and now I sell this idol to you, Stan, which you shouldn't buy, but in any event, let's say you do. I can't use the money that I sold it for. That money is also prohibited. And so as a result, similarly too, if in fact we were to say that the convert automatically, biblically got a piece of all of the deceased's property, well then everything that is the replacement of the idols constitutes stuff that would be prohibited. So it must be element rabbanan. It must all be rabbinic. And as we take a look in Rashi, this really helps us out here. Kilo bo nami. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi. Kilo bo nami. Mikimayis ovid kochavim. When the non-Jew dies, a zaka, this convert, it will have an ownership piece, v'chatzain, in part of it, in half of it, in the situation where there's two heirs. V'hashta kamachliv lahu, and now he's going to trade it out. And that would be a problem, and then it would all be prohibited. So elashmamina hada yorish es abiv lab. So we see it must be that the inheriting of a non-Jew by a convert is not biblical. Who? He's not considered on some level a descendant, an heir of the non-Jew. Dummy. He's like a newborn baby. It's comparable to element rabbanan, and it's only rabbinically that he is given the right to inherit. And why is that? So back into the Gemara, as we pick up, it's 5 lines up. First word on the line, Gzeira. Gzeirahu de Avud Rabbanan Shema Yachra Lasuro. That we wanted to make sure that that the convert didn't so get upset by the fact that he would lose this inheritance that he might actually return to his original non-Jewish ways. And so as a result, that's why the rabbi said, we're going to have this person inherit. Okay, so Tanya Nami Hachi, and we have a brisa that highlights this. But Medvarim Amurim, when do we say that a convert can exchange money instead of taking the idols? So Kisha Yarshu, that only applies when he's inheriting. Aval Kisha Nishtatapu Usr. But if in fact they had a business partnership, that would be prohibited because the business partners are already equal owners in everything. And you may then be splitting it, but we're going to say that they were equal owners in everything. Now, it's interesting. This actually raises the topic of breira. Do we say breira or not? When you have something that is eventually clarified, do we say breira? But bottom line is, Tosos notes here in the little Tosos Chalife over the Skochavim that in fact, it's not relevant for the purposes of our current discussion, and so as a result, that's Breira is the idea. We had this a couple of times as we've been going through the Gemara together, where let's say I have a big vat of wine that does not have Truma Meisers taken out of it. And so I want to say that a piece of it is for the Truma and Meiser. Exactly, it's for the priests. Because I can't have it while it's Tevel, while it's all mixed together. And so I can effectively say that the piece that I'm going to eventually separate, or I'm eventually going to have left over, so there's a debate. Can I say that will be the Truma? And so as a result, the first part that I have, I'm saying later we're going to make clear that is not the Truma and Meiser. It's almost like a promissory note, but the bottom line is it's a definition at the end of what exists now. It's redefining. It's saying, and so here, right, we have all of the property of the father, and some of it is going to go to heir number 1, and some of it is going to go to heir number 2. So can we say that even in the property of the father, everything that ends up in heir 1's possession was always heir 1's, and everything that ends up in heir 2's possession was always heir 2's? Or do we say, no, there was a moment when everything was owned by them jointly, and then it was separated? That's the question of Breira. So if we say Yesh Breira, well, then we would say that everything that heir 1 now owns is really what he owned to begin with. And if we don't say it, so then we're going to have a problem. And that's what the presumption seems to be in the Gemara, that we don't in fact say it here. But okay, so Ovid Kochavim es Ager. So now we have another situation. We had a convert inheriting from a non-Jew, but now we have the non-Jew inheriting from the convert. So here we have clearly it's talking about where the father converts after the child was born, and so as a result, the child never converted, and so is not Jewish, but the father is Jewish. So what happens? The ger es hager, and also one convert inheriting from another convert. So eino lo medivrei Torah v'lo medivrei sofer. We're not going to acknowledge this neither from the Torah nor from the rabbi. So bottom line is, it's not an inheritance at all. And here, this is where I meant to point out the letter Lamed. The Lamed takes us to the Tanya, because this is a brisa, for it was taught in a brisa. Lava ma'os min hager, if you borrow money from a non-Jew, shenisgairu banav imo, where the non-Jew and his children convert together, lo yachzer levanav. And now, obviously, the non-Jew, the parent has died, and so the inheritors are potentially, should potentially inherit the property. And what do we say? No, you don't have to pay back the children. And if you do, you haven't done anything so great that the rabbis would say yishikoach. As Rashi says, Ein Ruach. And let's take it just lo Yachzer Levanav. We're talking about the Rashi in the last line. Im Mesa'av, if the father dies, and Ein Ruach Chachamim Nocha Imenu, Ein Das Chachamim Nocha Aleim. It's not so great. The Masav. Klomer Ein Machzikin Lo Tobo. You don't say Yishakov. You don't say that. Oh, that's a good thing that you did. Shalo Hitzrichuhu Lakach, because you didn't need to. And the nice explanation, or the interesting explanation that I heard on this, is specifically the idea that if in fact we were to acknowledge the relationship pre-conversion, so then we are effectively diminishing the nature of that conversion. We are saying that conversion doesn't in fact reconstitute the person. And so as a result, that's why we want to, we have to be careful that we want to make sure that it's clear that this is a new person in front of us. And these are effectively people with a new relationship. And of course, this is why we have there is, however, a prohibition on siblings marrying each other if they convert. Because effectively, if they're truly newborn and not as if they're sort of newborn without even parents, so then they would be able to. But we say that we don't allow that to happen because we don't want the non-Jews to think that people are converting in order to engage in incest. Okay, so now the finishing up this brisa. So we said that you shouldn't do it, but second, we've got now a problem because we've got v'hatanan. This is again the Aleph here takes us to the Agos Agra, who says that it should say v'hatanan because this is a Mishnah in Shvius, and the Mishnah in Shvius says lava. What does it say? It says ruach chachamim nocha himenu. It says that it is good. So I don't understand. How could we say that the same thing, this paying back of the children whose father converted with them and loaned you money, how can paying back the children in one situation not be viewed as positive and in another situation viewed as positive? So lo kasha, kan shahora, so v'leida so shalo b'kedusha. So one situation is where the children, the descendants, the heirs were converted after, were born non-Jewish and then converted. But kan shahorato shalo b'kedusha v'leida so b'kedusha. But if the mother converted while she was pregnant, and so the child is born as a Jew or born with a Jewish mom, so then, as Rashi says, v'leida so b'kedusha, Heka delayda so shall ben kedusha michlaf b'Yisrael gamor. That since this child was born in kedusha with a mother who is Jewish, so we're worried that if in fact we were to say that this is not a good thing and that you shouldn't actually inherit, maybe there will be confusion, with a situation with a full-fledged Jew. That maybe in some situations you won't need to actually convert. Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad to hear, Mark. Okay, so, all right, so that is case number 2 and of
after the service.
Okay, we'll talk. Okay, so let's just go through this. Hold on, so to make sure I'm scrolling. Okay, so now we've done the three rules of Rava. So let's just go through them. One, a non-Jew does have a concept of inheritance. The second is that a convert doesn't have inheritance biblically, but does have rabbinically from his non-Jewish father. And the final case is that if you have, we're going to have a little bit more Rashi. We're going to have some Rashi. So, but we're in the middle of Rava, and we're going to have Reb Chia in a moment. So, and well, that's now you will. That's why you're here. Exactly. So, okay. So a non-Jewish child. And then the third case is the non-Jewish child of a convert and the convert child of convert parents. In both those situations, they do not inherit either biblically or rabbinically. And so now Reb Chia Bar Avin is going to say that it's a different citation, right? So we've given one citation for the fact that a non-Jew inherits from a non-Jewish parent, and now we're going, and namely, what did we cite? We cited the fact that with the verse that took us there in the first place, the fact that the slave, that when negotiating the redemption of a Jewish slave from a non-Jewish owner, you need to negotiate only with the master, only with the purchaser, because the purchaser's heirs will not inherit him, and implying that in ordinary situations they will inherit him. And Rav Chia is going to offer a different verse for that purpose. So Rav Chia Bar Avin Amar Rabbi Yochanan Ovid Kochavim Yorshas Aviv Dvar Torah. So again, same basic concept that a non-Jew will inherit his father. So Diksiv, because Ki Yerusha le'esav nasati es har seir. At the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, Moshe notes that Hashem has given to Esav har seir as an inheritance. It's a Yerusha. Torah says it's itself. So the Gemara answers, well, 1 second. Maybe Esav is a different case. Vidilma Yisrael Mumar Shiny. Maybe Esav, because he's a descendant of Abraham, that will be
before Esav.
Yeah, Esav. Yeah, he's a bad guy.
Used to be one by two that they had Esav.
Oh boy, he's a bad guy too. Then okay, so all right, so all right, okay, so so this Esav. So he is, he maybe the whole reason that he's allowed to inherit is because he was on some level Jewish. He was some level a descendant of Abraham, and as a result, so we'll let him inherit even though he has gone off the right path. So Elamihacha. So as a result, okay, we won't use that pasuk. But in that same context, in the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, now we'll just go to pasuk tet in Parak Bet. So we'll say Kilivnei Lot Nasati es Ar Yerusha. That the Torah says that to the children of Lot, of course, was Abraham's nephew. Hashem has given Ar, the city of Ar, or the area of Ar, as an inheritance. And so the point is that we see somebody who's been given an inheritance who's not Jewish. But Rav Chia Bar Avin, my time alo Amar Karava. Why doesn't Rav Chia Bar Avin like the answer that Rava gave that cites the pasuk about redemption? So mikse v'chishav im koneo below im yorshe koneo. But so he would say that I don't like it because the pasuk doesn't say that you're going to figure out the amount of the redemption with the purchaser, but not with the heirs of the purchaser. That would obviously be clear. But here, it only meant it doesn't say anything about heirs. So how can you learn that out? That inference is not a definitive inference. Rava, my time alo Amar Rav Chia Bar Avin. And why doesn't Rava like the answer of Rav Chia Bar Avin about citing Lot? Mishum kvoda de Abraham shiny. Maybe the fact that Lot was Abraham's nephew, that in and of itself was enough reason for Lot to have the power of inheritance. But you wouldn't be able to learn it about non-Jews in general. And so as a result, while everyone agrees that non-Jews have a sense of inheritance, we have this debate as to the source. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to quote a brisa that highlights distinctions between male and female Jewish slaves, but many of these distinctions that we're going to see are going to require clarification, so the Gemara is going to do so. And so I don't actually list the entire teaching, all the teachings here on the screen of every teaching that we're going to have in the Brisa, because we'll deal with almost all of them in the questions that will follow. So Tana Rabbanan, Yesh be'ivri she'ein be'ivriyah, there are certain rules that apply to a Jewish slave that do not apply to a Jewish female slave. And the yesh be'ivriyah she'ein be'ivri, and there are rules that apply to a Jewish female slave that do not apply to a Jewish male slave. Yesh be'ivri shehu yotzei b'shanim u'v'yovel v'misas ha'adon. So, for example, a male Jewish slave, he will go out with the years of service, meaning if he after 6 years, with Yovel, meaning whether Yovel comes in whenever Yovel comes, whether it's within the first 6 years or if he's nirtza, he has his ear bored, and then Yovel comes, he goes out, and with the death of the master. In all three of these situations, he goes out. Masha Ein Kain Be'ivriya, which is not true for a female servant. Now I'll pause here for a moment because all three of those do seem to be true for a female servant. So that's going to be question number one. What are you talking about? And of course, there is one way that a female Jewish servant is different, and that is that she goes out with the signs of adulthood. Now, that one isn't so problematic, and that's pretty clear. So that we don't have to teach something, but we'll see. We'll have to raise that in a moment. All right. Okay. The Aina Nimkeret Venishne, and she's not able to be sold multiple times. Okay, the Maftin Ota Bal Korcho, and she can be redeemed. We will redeem her against his will. So, whose will are we talking about? And what's the context of her not being sold multiple times? So, Masha Ein Kain Be'ivri, all of which is not true for a male servant. So, we are going to analyze each piece of this brisa, and through that we'll finish all of we'll do with all three aspects. So Amar Mar. So question number one is, you said yesh be'ivri she'ein be'ivriyah, that these are laws that apply to a male Jewish slave, don't apply to a female Jewish slave, or a minu. But our Mishnah itself contradicts this whole idea. Yisera alav amaha ivriyah shekona atzma b'simanin. We note the fact that a non-Jewish slave, a female slave, has an advantage over Jewish male slaves because she also has the ability to acquire herself through the signs of adulthood. And the point is, as Rashi says, let's see, where is this Rashi? Yisera, of last line of the the wide lines at the top of Rashi. Yisera alav ama havriya alma. So we see kol hanach isnahuba. All of the different reasons that are mentioned in our Mishnah apply to her, and so as a result, how can you say that none of them apply to her? So Amar Rav Sheshes could go shiyada. No, you have to understand that this brisa is talking about the situation where yiyud has happened. Again, as a reminder, yiyud is the concept that when an ama ivriya, a Jewish maidservant, is sold to somebody, she's sold when she's underage, before she turns 12 and has signs of adulthood. So as a result, she is being sold potentially as a wife. And the process of turning that Jewish maidservant into a wife is called yeyud. And yeyud, as we saw, there's a debate whether you use the language of yeyud or Kiddushin, but the bottom line is that is the process of marriage. And so we're talking about where the master has married her. Well, one second, yadab shita. If you tell me that it's yeyud, well, then they're married. Gita Baya, she's going to need a divorce. Of course, she's not going to go out with as a result of years, the death of the or Yovel, or the death of the master. Now, you may be asking, well, one second, the death of the master, she should go out, because if the master is the one who married her, well, then the marriage would end with his death, as we spent we spent like a whole day figuring out how we know that death actually results in the end of marriage. So the thoughts that I have in terms of that is two possible answers. One is that we could be talking about where the son was the one who did Yehud, and so as a result, if the master dies, the son still is married to her, so therefore that's not going to be an issue. Or alternatively, if the master dies without any descendants, without any children, so then even when he dies, she can't go. She's not really free because she's going to have a requirement for chalitza. So those are two potential ways to address how it is that in this situation of Yehud, we can still say that the death of the master only would allow a male servant to go out, but not a female servant who did Yehud. Okay, so Ma'odetema, low, and so why? So in second, isn't this all obvious? So Ma'odetema, lowly batla hilchas amina. I might have thought that even that when she's done Yehud, the other rules of how she could leave her master's house will still apply. So Kamash Malan, the Bryce is teaching us that all of these don't apply. That Yehud is a full-fledged marriage on at least some level. So Ihachi, and we'll see in a moment that the Gemara is going to ask about the nature of Yehud before the end of today. So Ihachi, Amay Yotza B'Simanin. Well, in that case, the next line of our brisa says she goes out with signs. If she's done Yehud, she doesn't go out with signs. So Hachi Kamar, this is what the brisa is telling. Im lo Ye'ada Yotza Afbe Siman. If she hasn't actually done Yehud, if they haven't actually married, well, then she will go out even with Simanin, meaning she has not only are the three methods that the man will go out, do they apply to her, so too does the method of becoming an adult. Okay, so that was question number one on our brisa. The Einanim Keres V'Nishne. So then we said that the woman, the female Jewish slave, can't be sold multiple times. So what is that in fact talking about? Miklal to Eved Ivri Nimkar V'Nishne. That first of all, that implies that a male Jewish slave can be sold again and again. But we have a brisa that seems to suggest otherwise, because it says that when a Jewish man is sold for having stolen something and not being able to pay back, he only gets sold for the object he sold, for not being able to pay back the object that he stole, not for not being able to pay back the double penalty. Because when you steal something, you don't only just have to pay back the object. If you get caught and get processed through the court system, and then you get found guilty, you have to not only pay back the object, but you have to pay back double. And so, even though you can't pay back double, we won't sell you in that situation. And also, it will make you only get sold if you can't pay back the object that you stole, not if you try to make somebody else pay back something for having stolen. So if Stan and I were to go and say to the court that Charlie stole something, and then Moshe and Mark were to come in and say, no, you couldn't have seen that because you were with us at that time, and so we become Edom Zomamin, so then we would be subject to that same penalty as if we had stolen from Charlie. Yes, we're going to have to pay, but because it's not an actual theft, even if we don't have the money, we do not get sold. So that's what B'Gneva To again teaches. And finally, what? Yeah, we're saying B'Gneva To Kevan Shenimkar Pam Achas Shuv I'ata Roshai Lemochra. And what does B'Gneva To also teach? And this is obviously the one that were relevant for us. If you're sold once, you don't get sold again. So Amarava, so how do we have this? So we have the question of our brisa suggests that male slaves can be sold multiple times, but this brisa seems to be clear that you cannot be sold a second time. Lo kasher kan b'gneva achas kan b'shnei gdemot. No, when you steal one thing, so then you can be sold one time. But when you steal multiple things, well, then for each thing you stole, you can be sold separately. So Amrle Abaye, but Gneva To Tuva Mashma. Gneva To implies all of the theft that the person gets done. That even if as long as he's subject to one trial about everything, then it should be a one issue. So in fact, Abaye says a different answer. Ella Amar Abaye lo kasha kan ba'adam echad kan b'shnei b'nei adam. The question is how many victims do you have? Meaning, how many court cases do you have? Because each victim is going to have his own court case, and so as a result, that's why you have multiple situations. So if in fact I were to steal from both Mark and Stan and be subject to the court case twice and not have the ability to pay back, so then I could be sold once in order to help pay back Stan and once to be able to pay back Mark. Okay, so that is the situation. Okay, so we've now answered that question, and now we're ready to go on to the third question, because again we had this situation that we are going to say we had 1 second. So we have 1 second. So we're going to have one more thing to highlight this. So Tanurabanan Gnevo. So having talked about when you sell somebody for a theft, we're now going to cite a brisa that relates to when we sell someone. So Gnevo elef b'shava chamesh me'ot. If you have stolen something where where the object is worth 1,000, but the thief is only worth 500, nimkar v'chozer v'nimkar. So the Gemara says nimkar v'chozer v'nimkar, that you actually sell him and you sell him again, implying that you could sell him twice. But if we take a look in the Hagot Hagra, at the letter Aleph, it says Girzas Harambam ve'eno chozer v'nimker. We do not sell him again, and of course that makes it more consistent with what we've been saying. That with the other brisa, that if it's a single theft, you're not going to sell the person twice. So we'll read it that way. So if in fact the thief is worth the theft is worth 1,000, but the thief is worth 500, so then we sell him and we don't sell him a second time. However, Gnevo Chamesh Meot B'Shava Aleph. But if he stole something that is worth 500, but he's worth 1,000, so Eno Nimkar Klal. Then the Tanakama says we don't sell him at all. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer is much more restrictive. There's only one case where we're going to sell somebody if they steal something. Imahaya Geneva Keneged Mimkaro Nimkar. Only if the thief and the theft are worth the exact same amount, then we're going to steal the person. Then the Beis Din is going to sell the person. Being lav eno nimkar. But if not, he's not going to be sold. And Amarava Bahazachanhu Rabbi Eliezer l'Rabbanan. It seems like the Rabbi Eliezer's logic makes more sense than the rabbis, because Demaishna Genevo Chamesh Me'od V'Shava Elef De'ein Nimkar. What's the difference between when the theft is worth 500 and the person and the thief is worth 1,000, where we say that we don't sell him? The Nimkar, why is that the case? Because the Nimkar Kulo Amar Rahmana. It's because you have to sell the whole person. You can't sell part of the person. And here, really, only part of the person needs to be sold in order to fulfill the obligation to pay back. The Lochetzyo, you can't sell part of him. Hachinami Nimkar B'Geneva so Amar Rahmana. So too, when we say that we got to sell the thief, and when it comes to selling for the theft, it refers to the theft. So we shouldn't sell the person for half of a theft, implying that you should only sell a thief if the value of the thief is the amount that he stole. Okay, so now that we've had that little aside, we go back to the last piece of the brisa, and we say umaktin osa bal karko, and that we will redeem her against his will. So whose will are we talking about? So Rav is going to give one explanation, and then Abai is going to correct it. So Sava Rabba Lamema Rabba think that it was saying Bal Karche to Adon, that the redemption is against the master's will, meaning that we'll allow somebody to redeem her against the master's will. But Amrle Abaye, my nihu, what law is this teaching? The kasabna le shtara adameha. What we're going to say that the guy is going to, that the father is going to write a promissory note for her value, and then she will be redeemed against his will. Amai nukit marganisa bidei bidei yahivna lechaspa. We're going to take away a pearl that's in her hand, in his hand, and instead we're going to give him a shard of pottery. That doesn't make any sense. That can't be it. So Ella Amar Abaye Bal Karche Da'av Mishum Pagam Mishpacha. No, we're going to make the father redeem her against the will of his own will, against the father's will. Because take a look in Rashi, it's about 6, 9, 10, 13, and 14 lines up. Bal Karcha Da'av Im Yeshlo, if he has the money, Kovinoto, we're going to force him Upodeota and force him to redeem her. And the reason is because the fact that he sold his daughter is a disgrace on the family, and so we don't want that to be the case. Well, ihachi eved ivri nami. Well, one second, why do we treat a Jewish female slave different from a Jewish male slave? Why not have a Jewish male slave also redeemed by the family against the will, or against the will of against their will? Nichpinu livnei mishpacha. Let's force the rest of his family, mishum pagam mishpacha, again because of the disgrace to the family. No, the problem is that the man has the ability to sell himself. The woman doesn't have the ability to sell himself. So the man could go back and sell himself again. Hadar azol mezabin nafshe. He'll sell himself again. So hachanami. Hadar azol b'mezabin la. Well, one second, maybe the father will go sell her once again. Well, that's why we learned hakatani eina nimkeret benishne. That's why we said the father doesn't have the ability to sell his daughter twice. And so we're going to make him redeem her, and as a result, he won't be able to sell her again. Okay, Umani, who is the Tana of this brisa that taught these rules? So Rabbi Shimon, it's Rabbi Shimon. The Tanya, Mocher Adam Espito, we have the Tana Kama is going to say, so we're going to take a look and see, here we go. Second, let's back up. Who's the Tana who taught this brisa? So it's Rabbi Shimon to Tanya because we have a brisa. Mocher Adam Espito Ishus Vishoneh. If a person sells his daughter into marriage, he can do so repeatedly, meaning that if the first husband divorces her and he comes back to the father and he is still she's still underage and she never actually went through to Nisuin, because if they actually became fully married, they only did Erisin. If she became fully married, well, then she leaves her father's possession. But so here they only did Erisin, and then he divorced her. So she now goes back to the father. The father can sell her a second time, l'shifchut v'shona, and he can also sell her into servitude multiple times. So, for example, if he sells her when she's 3, and now she's 9, and she's gone free, or she sells her when he's 5 or 6 or 7, and the next year is the Yovel year, so she goes free. So he has the ability to sell her again. The ishus achar shivchus, and he can sell her to marriage after having sold her into servitude. However, abalola shivchut achar ishu, but he no longer has the ability to sell her as a shivcha after she has been sold into a marriage. So that was the Tanakama's position, but now we have Rabbi Shimon's position, which is going to be consistent with the brisa that we taught earlier. So Rabbi Shimon says no. Just as a man can't sell his daughter as a slave after he has sold her into a marriage, he doesn't have the ability to sell her multiple times into slavery. And so that was the position that we had said in this brisa. Uplugda dahani tonight. And that machlokas that we just had in this brisa between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon is a machlokas that we can see somewhere else, because we have the following verse. Now let's just back up and note this verse. The verse says, Im ra'ah be'enei adoneha, if the female Jewish maidservant is not pleasant, doesn't work for the master, asher lo ya'ada, because the hefta, and there hasn't been either a marriage to her by the master or his son, and there hasn't been any redemption, la'am nachri lo yimshal l'machra, you cannot sell her to a another nation bivigdova with the beged her. Okay, now with his beged her. Now the question is what is this bivigdova? Now the issue is that the word beged can be beged, which means clothing, or bagad, which means betrayal. So we're going to see that that's going to lead to the following debate. So Titania, bivigdoba, we have a brisa that talks about this phrase bivigdoba. So Kevin Shaperas Taliso Aleha Shuv Ein Rashai Lamochra Divri Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva says that once he spreads his talus over her, meaning that it's a sense of marriage, and indeed in our marriage ceremony, when the husband either does the does the process of putting the veil over the his wife's the bedekin, putting the veil over the wife's head, or potentially under the chuppah. Sometimes they will stand under. They will put the husband will the groom will put his talus over his wife as well. So in those situations, so then that will that implies one that beged means that the beis gimel dalet here means clothing, and we're talking about marriage. So shuv ein rashai lemochra, so he doesn't have the right to sell her. So that was the Tanakama's position. The Tanakama in the brisa that we just had said that if in fact he's the father has sold her into marriage, he doesn't have the ability to sell her into slavery. But Rabbi Eliezer Omer bivigdoba. What does bivigdoba mean? Kevin shabagadba, since he was betrayed her. Shuv ein rashai lemochra. Once the father has betrayed her by selling her as a slave, he's not able to sell her again. So, but my kamiflaki, Rabbi Eliezer, what are they really arguing about? Rabbi Eliezer savar yesh aim lemisoris. That in fact there is the clear main point is the written word, and the written word is more like bagad, and so that it connotes betrayal, and so as a result, that's why he says that it's what can't be done is once the father sells her, then he's not able to sell her again. The Rabbi Akiva savar yesh aim lamikra, whereas Rabbi Akiva says no, the focus is what you read, and when we read it bivigdo, it sounds more like beged. And so that's going to be what we're going to focus on. Rabbi Shimon, and now Rabbi Shimon in our brisa, who says that both prohibitions apply, he says yesh aim lamikra vilamasoras. We're going to apply both rules. We're going to say that we're going to focus both on the way that the word is pronounced and the way that it's written. And as a result, he's going to have both a prohibition to sell her after having put her into marriage and to sell her after having sold her into slavery. So boy Rabba Baravuha. Yeyid Nesuinose Oerusinose. So now we have the final question that we're going to deal with today, and we're not going to finish that issue today. So is Yeyud a marriage? Does it do the whole thing? Does it do Kiddushin and Nisuin? After all, he's when it's Yeyud is done, the woman is already in his home. Or do we say no? It's just Erisin. It is just the first step. It's just the Kiddushin step. So nafkamina, and what difference does it make? Liyorsha velitama lahafer nadareha, for inheritance, for the so three differences. One is inheritance. One is to become tummy to her if the husband is a Kohen, and finally to annul her vows. So what's the halacha? What do we say? Which one is it? So Tashma, effort number one. So bivigdova. So we're going to cite this bigdova. So Kevin Shapeiras Taliso Aleha, citing Rabbi Akiva's teaching that since he's already spread his cloak over her, Shuv Eina Rashai Lamokra, he's not able to sell her any longer. So what is it? The implication? Zabuni hu delo mezabin. He can't sell her. Hayeyude miyayedla. However, he could still give her out of Kiddushin, meaning, but he give her over to marry someone else. The amrit nesuin also. And if you tell me that what we're talking about is a case of nesuin, well, Kevin denises shuv ein la'avia rishusba. As I said a few moments ago, once the woman goes through the second step of marriage and actually does nisuin, then even if she becomes divorced, she does not go back into her father's possession in order to allow him to do anything with her. So elalash mamina erisin osa. So it must be that when we talk about the spreading of the cloak over her, we're talking about Yehud and we're talking about the only Kiddushin. So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Hacha b'Kiddushin de Almakai. Well, one second, maybe the spreading of the cloak is not where the father originally sold her into sold her into slavery, and the slave master did Kiddushin with her. Maybe we're talking about a situation where the father gave her over for Kiddushin, and there wasn't a Yehud. V'hakikamar kaven shemasra avia lemisha nischayev v'she'era ksusa v'onasa. And since the father gave her over to somebody who's responsible for her food, her clothes, and her and the marital rights, so shuv ein yachal lamochra. So now he can no longer sell her as a maidservant. And so maybe that's what we're talking about. And we're not talking about having sold her originally as a maidservant and then the master did Yehud. And so as a result, our first effort is unsuccessful. And so we're going to need to try again. However, for that effort, you're going to need to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. So we can see, does Yehud create Nisuin, or is it just Kiddushin? Hold on for a moment. We're going to shut this down, and then we can continue. Hold on just a second. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi.